Welcome to MMA on the Rocks. My name is Bill Welker. You are listening to episode 313 of the podcast. Unless you're joining me live, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, you guys know the deal. If you want to catch a show live, subscribe on one or all of those channels. Turn on the notifications, that whole thing. I don't need to tell you every time. In any case, today is Tuesday, May 9th. Coming to you a few days later than normal. Got back last night pretty late from a long weekend at Disney World. Those of you who listen to the show regularly know that I spend a lot of time at Disney with the family. However, we decided to let our annual passes expire, so we took one last trip to go to the parks with our daughter. And it was a great time. I did watch the fights, so I'll get to all that. But yeah, I just got back a little bit too late last night to do a show, and it was just too much hassle to try and do it from a hotel room. So here we are. A few days later, you guys have probably heard all of the UFC 288 coverage that you care to hear, but here's my take anyway. Now, you guys know where I'm going to start with this. With my man, Matt, the Steamrolla Frevola, with the huge win over Drew Dober. Ranked opponent, first round knockout. I was going crazy watching this fight, guys. When you have friends and personal acquaintances who do this sport, the highs are really high, the lows are really low. You really feel for people. Those are your friends, and they're putting it on the line, getting hurt potentially. But man, when you have a friend, somebody that personally that you're rooting for, and you see them do well in this sport, it's such an awesome feeling. I was actually at Epcot with my family, with my wife and my daughter, and I had my buddy Matt text me. I said, text me when the Frevola fight is about to start. So he did, and I stopped right in my tracks. I wasn't going to miss this one, even if I'm at Disney World. So that's what I did. I sat on a curb on my phone to watch this fight, and man, this fight delivered. It was back and forth. Both guys landing heavy shots. The body kick was there for Frevola, as it tends to be orthodox against southpaw. For both guys, the body kick is there because one side of the body is a little bit more open. So he was landing some heavy body kicks. Drew didn't like those. He started adjusting, started stifling Matt a little bit with the range. And then started landing some big shots of his own. But Frevola just is such a dog, man. He just stayed right in the pocket. And, landed a big hook on the jaw. And it was just a beautiful knockout. Came with the Dan Henderson flying elbow on top of it. And I think it was a good stoppage. I know Drew was a little upset, but it wasn't going to be good for him to stay in that position much longer. But man, what a huge win for Matt Frevola. In case you guys don't believe me, here's the photograph of my phone. Matt with his hands raised on my phone, looking at the iconic Epcot ball there. For those who don't know, that's kind of like the symbol of the Epcot theme park. There's a little ride inside of that thing. It's like right at the front of the park. We were getting ready to leave for the night, and I didn't want to rush back to the hotel. I was like, no, we're sitting down right here in front of the bathrooms and watching this fight. And I started losing it when he knocked out Drew Dober. I was like screaming with my phone. All these people at Disney World with their families. My wife is like, "Well, what happened?" And it's just awesome. Just so happy for this dude. Just such a nice, genuine, loyal dude. The kind of guy that you're just so happy for when good things happen to him. And I know how hard he works. I know how much he's put into this. Um, been buddies with him for a few years now. He's been on the show several times, and just really glad to see these things happen for him. He got a lot of the headlines on Sunday. He made the rounds on all the big podcasts. I saw he was on Michael Bisping's podcast, and just so happy for this guy getting the shine that he deserves. And man, if people didn't know before, they know now. This dude has bricks in his hands. Drew Dober, I don't think he's either never been knocked out or hasn't been knocked out in a really long time, since like early in his career. So this is a huge feather in the cap for Matt Frevola. So happy for the guy. Can't stress that enough. And then he was great on the microphone too. I mean, here's a guy who it took him a few years to kind of let his personality come out. Even the first time he was on this podcast, very reserved, very humble. But when you talk to him in person, he actually is like a very funny and personable guy. So I'm really glad to see that he's starting to let that come through as well. Because that's just as important as the performances in the octagon. Gives a little homage to Chael Sonnen with the call out of Paddy Pimblett, telling him he absolutely sucks. I loved it. I listened to Chael this morning. Chael loved it. And usually Chael's only talking about the main event and then pretending he watched the rest of the card. So it was pretty cool to hear Frevola get the shout out from him. As far as the call out of Paddy Pimblett, I mean, look, I support the guy. It's what he wants. But I think at this point he's punching down. I get why he was calling him out earlier, because he's trying to get a big fight and get some shine, get some clout. And frankly, I don't think Paddy poses any threat to him at all. But with this win, Frevola is going to be ranked. I don't believe Paddy is ranked. And here's what a good dude Frevola is, because Ray Longo brought this up to him, and Matt's response was, well, Drew Dober was ranked when I wasn't, and he gave me a shot. So why wouldn't I return the favor to somebody else? What a great dude, man. But yeah, I feel like Paddy Pimblett is 100% a step down in competition from Drew Dober. No disrespect to Paddy. That's just the way it is. He doesn't have the same weapons. He doesn't have the same threats that a Drew Dober does. On the other side of the coin, if he's looking up the mountain, he's looking at fights with guys like Rafael Fiziev. Even though he's coming off a loss to Justin Gaethje, that's a dangerous man. That's a really dangerous fight right there. But so was Drew Dober. And I feel bad for Drew, taking his knockout loss as well, because I'm a fan of Drew Dober too, which sucks when, it's almost a little easier when people you like are fighting an asshole. It makes it just so much easier to root for the other guy to lose. But when you have a guy like Drew Dober, who's just like so polite and so respectful, it sucks. Somebody's got to lose. And to be honest with you, I'm glad it wasn't Frevola that had to lose. So big congratulations to the Steamrolla. I wish him nothing but continued success. It was an awesome night for him. It was an awesome night for his whole team, because I guess you could still say his teammate Aljamain Sterling, obviously with the big win in the main event. Aljamain started out with Longo Serra fight team and has since moved out to Vegas, but still has Ray Longo in his corner. It's kind of an unusual situation, but whatever works for them as long as it's amicable for everybody. Amicable. Sorry. It's late at night, guys. Give me a break. I got a master's degree in English, but I can't always articulate sometimes. It happens. All right, so Aljamain Sterling defends his title against Henry Cejudo, split decision victory. What do you guys think of that decision? Personally, I scored it pretty clearly for Aljamain Sterling. At the end of the fight, it seemed to me like Henry Cejudo knew he lost. It kind of seemed like Aljamain Sterling almost took the 5th round off. Obviously, that 5th round was clearly should have been scored for Henry Cejudo. What was weird about the scorecard? So obviously a split decision. I don't need to explain to you what that is, but 2 judges had it for Aljamain Sterling and 1 had it for Henry Cejudo. One of the judges that gave it to Aljamain Sterling scored the 5th round for Aljamain, meaning if he had scored that round correctly, which it seems to be consensus across the board that Henry Cejudo won the 5th round. I don't think many people would argue that. I think it was Derek Cleary, had he scored that 5th round correctly, we'd be looking at a new champion. We'd be looking at Henry Cejudo as the bantamweight champion right now. So it's a game of inches, really. I think consensus, everybody thought Aljamain Sterling won the 1st round and the 4th round, and everybody pretty much knows that Cejudo won the 5th. So it all kind of comes down to how you scored the 2nd and the 3rd, and they were close rounds. If you told me you scored 2 and 3 for Cejudo and 1 and 4 for Aljamain Sterling, I would entertain that argument. I would hear you out. And then there are people who think Aljamain was up 4-0 going into that 5th round. I think it's fewer people who thought that. I think as I was watching it, I gave Aljamain Sterling the 1st, the 3rd, and the 4th. And I gave Cejudo the 2nd and the 5th. It was super close, but at the end of the day, obviously Cejudo took a lot more damage. He took a lot more clean shots. Aljamain was getting pushed against the cage a little bit, but he wasn't really getting hit as much as it looked like. If you look at the numbers here, which I never put anything into these numbers, they're totally irrelevant because you don't have these numbers available to you while you're scoring the fight. The judges don't have these numbers. You don't have these numbers while you're watching the fight. So I always think it's stupid to use this as an argument why one guy should win over the other. But, the numbers kind of reflect what I saw. Aljamain was hitting Cejudo more than he got hit. And that showed on Cejudo's face. It showed in his demeanor. He kind of knew that he had been beat when it was over. So, and then the most surprising stat, though, is that Aljamain Sterling landing more takedowns than Cejudo. One of the funniest moments for me, anyway, was when Aljamain was in deep on a double leg, and Henry Cejudo basically went into a full split to try and avoid the takedown. I think that was in the 4th round or so. Neither guy really doing much with the takedowns. However, Aljamain Sterling has much better control on the ground. Henry Cejudo was wrestling like a wrestler. Once he hit the ground, he didn't really adjust his grips for striking or for submissions. It was more, he was usually more wrestling control positions, which is good. If you're holding a guy down the entire fight, but if you only get him down 3 times, you got to do some damage while he's there. Especially those situations where Aljamain Sterling was on all fours, and Cejudo was looking to control the front headlock instead of going for strikes or trying to advance his position. There wasn't really any offensive grappling once he got the takedowns, whereas Aljamain was staying a little bit busier. And that was the story of the fight, man. Aljamain Sterling, a lot of people saying, possibly the greatest bantamweight of all time. He's got the most wins in the UFC at bantamweight and the most title defenses with 3. So what are your thoughts? Is Aljamain Sterling the greatest bantamweight of all time? If Jeff the Animal Wilson were here, I'm sure he would still be vouching for Dominic Cruz as the greatest. I don't know, man. It's hard to argue against it with the resume he has, most title defenses. This is a belt that has traditionally changed hands pretty frequently, just because it's such a stacked division. It's hard for guys to stay on top of it for so long, and that's what he's been able to do. Obviously, the next fight is going to be Sean O'Malley. They brought him into the cage. He took off his Michael Jackson Thriller jacket, and Merab Dvalishvili stealing jackets and stealing headlines. All he did was, I don't know how he got a hold of Sean's jacket. I guess he took the jacket off to like flex in front of Aljo and tell him that he fought like shit. And then the next thing, Merab has it. And I like noticed that he was wearing it, but I also didn't. Like it came into my line of vision, and I noticed the jacket on him, and I'm like, that's weird to be wearing a leather jacket. And then O'Malley got pissed and tried to get the jacket back, and then Merab ran away with it. Like, and it's just like the smile on his face, where he was like so proud of himself. It made that moment so funny, especially because he has like such an innocence about him. That the fact that he was just playing around, taking a guy's jacket, it was very endearing, I guess, and that's what made it so funny. Um, Mark Fellows says Merab want to be starting something. Yeah, he's bad, man. He's bad. Who's bad? Merab's bad. Yeah, but I mean, I thought it was a great fight. I thought it was a great main event. Cejudo obviously is still a top level competitor. I mean, he may have lost a step. He looked good. I think he can still, make a run at the title if he wants to. The problem with it is, you know, he was coming into this fight, I think, expecting to run through Aljamain Sterling and then move up to 145 pounds. I think that's not the move. After seeing this performance, I don't think a fight with Volkanovski would go well at all for Henry Cejudo. Aljamain Sterling, on the other hand, he's destined for 145 pounds. It seems to be that after the O'Malley fight, he plans to move up. Whether or not he'll be able to challenge for the title will depend on if he wins against O'Malley. If he is able to finish Sean O'Malley, and he has like a big pay-per-view, yeah, they'll probably throw him into a title shot at 145. If he loses, I see him moving up anyway. He just got a big frame. I mean, 5'7" for 135 pounds, and he carries a lot of muscle. I think he could very easily move up to 145. I think it's a tough cut for him. I don't think he would even have to put on much more weight. He would probably do just fine walking around, with the build he walks around at now. I'm not sure what he weighs outside of fight camp. I would imagine somewhere in the high 150s. But yeah, I think he's on a trajectory for 145 pounds, no doubt about it. And then I guess the plan is for him to step out of the way so that Merab can rule that division, since he's the clear number one contender, but he won't fight his buddy. Cejudo took off his gloves at the end of the fight, and then he was just like, you know what, Joe, I'm just kind of confused. I don't know what I'm going to do right now. And then like 20 minutes later in the press conference, he's calling out Merab and wants to fight him in August. That's a fun fight. That's a really fun fight because obviously Merab's strength is his wrestling. Henry Cejudo, Olympic gold medalist, but Aljamain Sterling took him down 4 times. So would Merab be able to get him down? And the other thing is, even when Merab can't get people down, he still gives them fits. Like, look at the Jose Aldo fight. He wasn't able to get Aldo down, but he just threw him up against the cage and just bullied him for 3 rounds. So the guy's a nightmare, whether you have to deal with the wrestling or not. And, Cejudo, I think he's just got a couple of things to fix. The karate stance was a little bit weird to me. I don't really know what was going on with that. I feel like his frame is better suited for more of a boxing stance, a little bit wider of a base. And that will lend itself to the wrestling as well, because when you're standing straight up in that karate stance, it makes it more difficult to change levels. It also makes it more difficult to stop the takedowns. So I don't know if he's going to stick with that or not. All right, moving on. Co-main event. This one was, this one got a little dull for me, but, credit to Bilal Muhammad stepping up on short notice to take this fight. This fight, it's still not entirely clear to me why this fight was put together, like why they had to scramble to put this fight on here. And they couldn't just, let these guys fight on the same card as, Leon Edwards and Colby Covington, because they're going to have to wait for the winner of that anyway. Like, why was there such a rush put on this? Bilal Muhammad was coming off of Ramadan, so his weight was an issue. He asked for the fight at 185. Gilbert Burns said no. But, he's a professional. He did the right thing, made the weight anyway. And to me, he looked different, though. Bilal Muhammad is usually, looks a lot more like he's carved out of rock. And his body composition looked a little, I don't want to say soft, because he still looked in incredible shape, but soft compared to what he normally looks like on fight night. Apparently he was dealing with an ankle injury coming into this. And he was getting the better of Gilbert Burns. The switching stances was really throwing Gilbert off. It wasn't giving him a consistent target. Gilbert was getting frustrated, winds up lunging in for a takedown, and I guess separated his shoulder or did something to his left shoulder. Basically wasn't able to throw his left hand the whole rest of the fight. So you got a guy with one leg fighting a guy with one arm. Didn't make for the most interesting fight, except for the fact that, you're watching wondering, like, whose injury is gonna which injured guy is gonna prevail. But obviously pretty one-sided fight for Bilal Muhammad. So I would think, like, clearly they should give him the winner of Leon Edwards and Colby Covington. But, Bilal is one of these guys that doesn't do himself any favors, when it comes to getting on the microphone and stuff like that, and saying that the UFC undervalues him. It becomes a complex of, like, look, every single job has this person who says, who thinks in the way that, oh, this business would fall apart if I wasn't here. Everybody has worked with somebody like this at some point or another, where they talk about how much they do for the company, and kind of toot their own horn a lot and say, you know, this place would fall apart if it wasn't for me. And then if that person happens to leave, it's like business as usual. You know, you weren't as big of a cog in the machine as you thought you were. Because everyone at every job is replaceable, especially in the UFC. And I think that's more the mentality that provides a more cohesive relationship with the UFC. When guys are constantly like asking for stuff and making cases for why they deserve it, um, I think it tends to work against them. And now he's coming off of a big win over Gilbert Burns, but you could frame it in a certain way and say like, well, Gilbert was hurt because, you know, Gilbert's been taking too many fights, fought 3 times in 3 months or whatever ridiculous stat it is. Um, and it was a boring fight. I'm not saying this is what I think, by the way. I think Bilal Muhammad deserves to fight for the championship in his next fight. No question. I'm just saying it could be framed a certain way to screw him over, you know, depending on kind of how he acts leading up to the Colby and Edwards fight. You know, there is going to be a potential for him to get screwed. They're gonna say like, well, we need a favor. We need somebody to fight Rachmanov because nobody's gonna do it. And Bilal will be like, I've done all this work. I've done all this heavy lifting. Like, but you know, crazier things have happened. You know, that's just kind of the name of the game. It's a weird thing. Credit to both of these guys for stepping up on short notice, even though I still can't figure out the rhyme or reason for why this fight had to be put together on short notice, like why they couldn't just do it down the line when both guys were better prepared. Gilbert Burns, man, people love him because he's active, he's competitive. I mean, the guy's doing grappling tournaments when he's not fighting in the UFC. 3 fights in 3 months or whatever crazy stat it is. The problem there is that historically, that never works out well. There's always some type of burnout with these guys who fight so frequently. You know, Cowboy Cerrone, of course, comes to mind, fighting like 6 times in a year. I think he even fought 7 times one year. And yeah, Cowboy's great. He's exciting to watch. Everybody loves him. He's got a ton of fans. But when you fight so frequently, you tend to get mixed results, you know, because you're putting your body through so much stress. And I'm not going to say that's what caused the injury to Gilbert's shoulder. You know, maybe he had a pre-existing injury. And then once he heard it, he seemed to get inside his own head about it. You know, every time he went back to the corner with Henry Hooft, he told him, I can't do anything with my left arm. And he couldn't seem to snap out of it. He couldn't seem to adjust his game plan to overcome it. And, you know, I'm not saying he should have. You know, sometimes an injury is just that bad where it's all you can think about. Like, oh, how do I stay in this fight without hurting myself more? And that's the decision Gilbert Burns had to make. I hope he takes a little bit of time off and rests and recovers and heals up. And yeah, that was that. Jan Zionan knocking out Jessica Andrade. For me, this stoppage was a little bit premature, only slightly. You know, Jan was doing all the right things with Jessica. She was baiting her into a firefight, letting her throw big looping punches and countering with straight punches down the pipe. Her kicks looked really, really nice too. She was doing a good job throwing while she was backing up, and caught her and dropped her. When she went to the ground with her, though, Jessica Andrade immediately set up a frame with her leg. which was to me intelligently defending herself. Now, had it gone on another 15 seconds, would she have gotten knocked out? Maybe. Um, I would have liked to see it go a little bit more. But regardless, a great performance by Yan Xiaonan. Um, I thought she looked phenomenal, and I guess they're talking about doing a title shot for her between her and Wiley in China. That would be absolutely huge for them. So, and it's an interesting fight too. You know, Jan is someone who has made big improvements since coming to the UFC. So it would be interesting to see that fight. Movsar Evloev getting the unanimous decision win over Diego Lopez. All anyone is talking about is Diego Lopez coming in on short notice. This got fight of the night. These guys got bonuses in addition to my buddy, the Steamrolla. So happy for all of them. Interesting because here it was supposed to be Evloev against Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell pulls out like 2 days before the fight. Diego Lopez steps up to make his UFC debut, and he fought this fight like he didn't give a fuck who Evloev was. Here's this absolute monster mauler in Movsar Evloev, undefeated. Nobody wants to fight this guy. And Lopez came in and brought the fight to him. Had him in some really tight submissions. Had a nice arm bar at one point. Had a nasty knee bar at the end of the fight. And Evloev is just one of these guys that will not tap. He'll let you just break whatever you want. And he also said he's really flexible. Coming away with the victory here, everybody giving the credit to Lopez, as they should, because he came into a fight on short notice, making his debut, and made it competitive with a guy that was supposed to just blow him out of the water. However, I got to give a lot of credit to Evloev too, because he didn't have to take this fight. He was supposed to be fighting a ranked contender in Bryce Mitchell, and at the last minute, he gets told he's fighting a guy making his debut that he doesn't really know anything about. That's a huge risk. He had way more to lose, and Lopez had way more to gain in this fight. So, yeah, I was super impressed with Diego Lopez in this fight. And you could even tell me you thought he won because of the submission attempts and stuff like that. You know, Evloev even had a hard time getting him down early on in the fight. But I have to acknowledge the fact that Evloev had a lot more to lose by taking this fight. And I respect that a lot. The fact that he could have just said, no, I'm going to wait for another ranked opponent. This dude's a real fighter. And he's a real problem as well. And I think if he has time to prepare for an opponent, things will go a lot better for him. Kron Gracie just shit in the bed against Charles Jourdain. Jourdain had a great game plan. I mean, here's a guy who earlier in his career was a little bit wild, a little bit reckless, and it resulted in him, losing some close decisions and stuff like that because he was just going for broke and not going for the win. We saw a patient Charles Jourdain who knew exactly what he needed to do against Kron Gracie, stifled him on the feet. I don't know if they had the stats for this one. Let me pull this up. This is the first time I'm using the UFC website for this. So let's see. Kron landed 32 significant strikes. I don't even feel like that's accurate. And then, he wound up having to pull guard, which I'm a big advocate of never pulling guard, not in jiu-jitsu and especially not in MMA, where you can be underneath somebody who can punch you and cause damage to you. It's totally different than just grappling. But if you are going to pull guard, I guess it helps if your last name's Gracie. It's hard to justify this fight for Kron, especially because he acted like such an asshole leading up to the fight. Like, not necessarily to Jordan, but just like in all the interviews, and like just seemed like he didn't want to be there. Um, I guess some things changed up in his training. He's not training in California anymore. He moved out to Montana, training with who knows who. Um, yeah, I mean, if you're the UFC, you probably gotta let this guy go, because even though he has a small record, like, and he's coming off of a loss, there's a reason he's on the main card, and that's because the UFC is probably paying a shitload of money for his name. No Gracie is putting on the MMA gloves unless they're getting paid handsomely. That means he's got a good contract, which also means if the UFC gives him another fight, they have to put him on the main card, because you can't be paying somebody big money and just putting them on the prelims, right? This is kind of the problem they ran into with Ronda Rousey. After the loss to Amanda Nunes, and after the loss to Holly Holm too, they can't just bring her back and give her a tune-up fight, because they're paying her millions of dollars. They have to give her a high-profile fight. So they kind of are in the same situation here. I don't imagine they're going to keep him after this. I mean, the guy was butt scooting across the octagon like it was still 1993. And you just can't fight like that anymore. I thought he looked better in the Cub Swanson fight. And he lost that one too, but at least, he was throwing his hands a little bit more. He was engaging more. Yeah, I don't know what the guy's deal is. It just kind of seems like this is not what he wants to do. So, I mean, if that's the case, he probably shouldn't do it. And that's that. We already talked about Matt Frevola and Drew Dober. If you just look at the strikes here, Frevola was landing a lot more, especially to the body. Especially to the head. I was looking at the wrong line here. So big congrats again to the Steamrolla, Matt Frevola. Kennedy and Zechiku with a really nice, they're calling it a standing guillotine. It's really like a front choke. Some people call it a ninja choke, which is like the rear naked choke grip, but you're just standing in front of the opponent instead of on their back. I don't know that I would necessarily call this a guillotine, but that's what it's going down as. Put Devin Clark to sleep. Fairly competitive fight up to that point. But man, Nzechukwu must have a hell of a squeeze, because he just put Devin Clark unconscious. So super impressed with that. Chaos Williams split decision win over Rolando Bedoya. I think I didn't catch this fight personally, but this one I heard was a little bit controversial of a decision. I don't know if I need to go back and watch this one, let me know. And I will do so. Otherwise, I won't. Virna Jandiroba with the unanimous decision over Marina Rodriguez. Jandiroba is a beast, man. She gets those takedowns and she gets on top, and she's got some heavy pressure. 12 minutes of control time with no submission attempts. So she was just smothered Marina Rodriguez. And then the first three fights of the card, all knockouts. Parker Porter knocking out Braxton Smith. Ikram Alaskarov with the knockout of Phil Hawes, which you kind of have to be concerned for Phil Hawes. I think this is maybe 3 knockout losses in a row. So I don't know, maybe some time off, maybe like a reassessment. Not sure. Claudio Hiberio, second round knockout over Joseph Holmes. Awesome card overall, I thought. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I was at Epcot watching Matt Frevola's fight, and then I got back to my hotel room just in time for the Kron Gracie fight. Although I kind of wish I didn't because it was I didn't need to see that fight. Uh, Credit to Charles Jourdain though, like came in with a game plan and executed. So good for him. All right, let's look ahead to next week, shall we? So, Charlotte, North Carolina. We got the heavyweights here. Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Jailton Almeida. This is a very interesting fight because Almeida has that nasty grappling, but the dude can also strike. Like he's got very accurate strikes. He doesn't get hit a lot. However, Rozenstruik is a high level striker. You guys know I've been high on Rozenstruik since before he came to the UFC. I kind of had higher expectations for him than what wound up taking place for him in the UFC, but nonetheless, is still a he's a much bigger guy than Almeida. You know, 261 pounds to 232 pounds for Almeida. That makes a big difference, especially if Almeida's game plan is going to be to get it to the ground. It's going to be tough to get Biggie Boy down. However, Almeida is younger. He's faster. He's got a little bit more reach. And he's statistically got more accurate striking. So that's going to be a problem for Rozenstruik because Rozenstruik has big power, but he's not necessarily explosive. He really sets things up methodically, and he sets traps on the feet. I just don't know if he's going to be able to do that against Almeida because the guy is just, so athletic. It's going to be tough for Rozenstruik to execute his typical game plan. And then if Almeida is able to get on top of Rozenstruik, it may be a quick night. So I tend to lean towards Almeida in this one, but Rozenstruik definitely has the power to put Almeida out, and this is going to be the big test for Almeida. They're kind of fast tracking this guy because he's another guy that nobody really wants to fight. He's looked phenomenal since he's moved up to heavyweight. The guy's built like a Greek god, and he's super well rounded. So let's see. Does he have the wrestling to get Biggie Boy down? I don't know. If he can, bet the house on Almeida because that's going to be all she wrote. Once this guy gets on top, it's just a done deal. Co-main event: Anthony Smith and Johnny Walker. Looks like an even money fight right now. This is one of those things where it's, both of these guys are kind of hot and cold. Johnny Walker is either going to knock you out or, he's going to get knocked out or get dominated. If you're looking at these guys on paper, I think Anthony Smith is the much more skilled fighter. No doubt about it. But I mean, he's given. I'm not usually big on reach advantages. I don't think it's that much of an advantage. But you're talking about a 6-inch difference here. So Johnny Walker is going to be able to touch up Anthony Smith from the outside. Anthony Smith is going to have to work hard to close the distance. I think if he gets a hold of Johnny Walker and is able to put him down and tire him out, that'll be all she wrote for Johnny Walker. He won't make it to the end of this fight. However, Johnny Walker has that X factor, which is his explosiveness, that seems to come out of nowhere, like a Florida rainstorm. And so I would think it would either be an early knockout win for Johnny Walker or Anthony Smith drags him into moderately deep waters and drowns him there. So that's that. All right, Ian Garry making it to the main card. He's a favorite over Daniel Rodriguez. This is gonna be a tough test for Ian Garry. I mean, he looked good. He looked good in his last fight, but he got touched a little bit. Um, so we're gonna see what he's got. This is definitely gonna be his toughest test so far. Daniel Rodriguez is a gamer. Um, Most likely these two are gonna stand with each other, and I think Ian Garry's a little bit more slick on the feet, um, better footwork, but Daniel Rodriguez, you can never underestimate a guy like Daniel Rodriguez because he's just got that dog in him. Um, this matchup is kind of similar to the Drew Dober Matt Frevola matchup, you know, where one guy has very clean technique, good slick footwork, and the other guy just has a will to win. So this is actually a very interesting fight. Jump around a little bit here. Tim Means and Alex Morono. This is an interesting one. Obviously, Tim Means, a grizzled veteran, 39 years old, man. He's been at this a long time. And Morono, 32, just coming into his prime. It's going to be a tough fight for Tim Means, I think. He's got a little bit of reach. He's definitely got the experience, but I could see why Morono's a favorite here. Interesting fight, though. Then on the prelims, we got Matt Brown and Court McGee. Court McGee coming off a big knockout loss in his last fight. Matt Brown coming off of the decision of Brian Barberena, I think. Interesting matchup here. Court McGee, just a grinder, but it's going to be hard to grind a guy like Matt Brown, who's just so good in the clinch. Like, even if you bully him up against the cage, he's got that really nice tie clinch, great sweeps, nasty elbows, mixes in the knees with his clinch really well. And then if you give him space, he's great at range as well. So Court McGee's going to have to, I think, close the distance, get this one to the ground, and grind it out against Matt Brown, and hope that Matt Brown, being 42, plays against him, and he's not able to get back up. But Matt Brown's super well rounded too. I mean, the guy's good off his back. I don't know. I would imagine this is like a loser leaves town kind of fight. 42 years old for Matt Brown, Court McGee, 38. Both of these guys, veterans of the Ultimate Fighter. Matt Brown, I feel like, is pretty close to the record for most knockouts in the UFC. So I don't know if he's just going for that and then is going to ride off into the sunset. I think he's already retired once before. But then his retirement fight, I think he knocked out Diego Sanchez, and he's like, man, I still love this shit. You gotta love Matt Brown. Let me see. What else is jumping out to me here? Yeah, Brian Battle on this card. Another Ultimate Fighter guy against Gabe Green. Green is coming in at the favorite, so that's interesting. And Jessica Rose Clark all the way at the bottom of this card. I don't know who she pissed off. A slight favorite over Tainara Lisboa. This is a fun card, guys. I'm going to be away again next weekend. My parents are coming into town, so we're taking a little road trip with them to Sarasota, Florida for Mother's Day because I got my mom tickets to see Tom Jones concert. Tom Jones, man, still doing the damn thing, just like Matt Brown and Court McGee. Guy's like 83 years old, just had a hip replacement surgery, still gets on stage every night, dancing all over the place. I hope I'm in that kind of shape when I'm 83, but I think I'm going to need a hip replacement when I'm 43. So it's not looking good, guys. I don't think I'm going to be in Tom Jones shape in my 80s. Um, in any case, that's what I'm going to be doing. So I'm looking at next week's episode, maybe around Monday. And then after next week, I'm looking to get back into recording on Sundays again. It's just usually easier for me. And then, I like to get the content out to you guys before all the big shows release their episodes, so you can get MMA on the Rocks can be like a little appetizer for your MMA podcasting week, I guess. In any case, very happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. I hope everybody has a very enjoyable day. Get to relax a little bit, enjoy some time with the kids. Happy Mother's Day to my beautiful wife as well. So thankful for her. Without her, I wouldn't be a father, which is one of my favorite things to be. I guess I could say it's my favorite thing to be. It's the end of the episode. Nobody's listening, In any case, happy Mother's Day, everybody out there. Totally unrelated because nobody's buying this for their mother. But if you want to get some MMA on the Rocks merchandise, t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, do so through our friends at Team Reaper. Reaper1.co is the website. I'll put the links in the show notes. As always, you can use the promo code MMA Rocks 10. Save yourself 10% on your entire order. And that's all I got, folks. So until next time, cheers, everybody. Goodbye.